Hello, welcome to a brand new video. So this is one that I've been so excited to film, which sounds really weird considering it's about the things that went wrong at my wedding. But I feel like I was that person who was adamant nothing would go wrong at my wedding. I'd managed everything to perfection, I'd managed everyone to a T, I'd planned everything, and I was just certain that nothing could go wrong. And what I've learned is if there is a wedding happening, something is going to go wrong. And that is because we can't manage everything. No matter how much you've planned, you can't manage people. People can't manage themselves sometimes. We can't manage the weather. We can't manage our venues. There's so much that's out of our control that with something so large scale as a wedding, it's likely something is going to go wrong. And this isn't just coming from my wedding. I've been to a wedding since, and I've heard stories of other weddings recently, and with every single one of them, something has gone wrong. With our wedding, multiple things went wrong, not just one thing. And some of the things were so rogue, so out there, like you just never could have imagined in a million years or predicted or planned against what happened. Like, I genuinely can't believe one of the things that happened at our wedding happened. Like, it was just such a freak thing to happen. So I'm really hoping that by sharing what went wrong at our wedding, that I'm gonna help people out there. If you're currently planning a wedding and you're stressing about things going wrong, hopefully this will just show you that probably something might go wrong, but it'll be fine. It'll be absolutely fine, and you'll still have the perfect day. We still had the perfect day, and genuinely, hand on heart, we did. And the majority of things that went wrong, nobody else knew about. Nobody was any the wiser, because the only person who knows what you've planned is you. Of course, there are things that can happen that do have a wider effect, and that's certainly the case for the wedding that I recently attended, where there was something that was noticeable, but it still didn't change anything. It's not the thing that I would talk about if I was asked about the wedding. It was just a really tiny blip. So yeah, I'm going to be sharing all the things that went wrong. There's quite a few, starting from before the wedding, and I really hope this puts your mind at rest if you're currently wedding planning and worrying about things going wrong. So I'm actually going to start with the one thing that I worried about the most in the lead up to the wedding, and arguably the thing you can control the least, even if you plant a sausage. And if you haven't heard of what that means, you don't know what that means, Google it. But that is the weather. So I was so stressed about the weather leading up to our wedding. Our wedding was in July, and you think July, summer, sun, but actually historically the past few Julys have been really wet, and we booked our date over 2.5 years in advance of our wedding, and the next 2 Julys were awful. They were so wet, and I just really didn't want rain. We had like such a beautiful venue with such lovely outdoor space, and I didn't want to worry about getting wet and my hair getting frizzy and all of that stuff. And I wanted to be able to make use of the outside for the drinks reception, and we were having a garden party the night before, and I was just so sad to think that it could rain when we'd booked a premium summer date, and I really was obsessed with it. Particularly the week before our wedding. If you watched my vlog leading up to the wedding, we had the nicest weather we'd had. The same 3 days that our wedding was over, the week before, we had the perfect weather, and up until that point it had just rained, and I was so like wishing that I'd picked the week before because it was perfect weather. But anyways, I came on to say that we had perfectly fine weather. It stayed dry. Literally, it threatened rain a couple of times, and by threatened I mean we had some grey clouds and we had the tiniest little drops, like you just felt a little bit of wetness in the air, and then it was gone. And we had some lovely clear skies as well, and some lovely sun and an amazing golden hour. And the only time that it rained was at some point really late in the evening, which we didn't even know because we were in the tippies, we were just dancing and having a great time, and we only knew it had rained when we left to go to bed at midnight and saw that the ground was wet. So yeah, the thing that you can control the least is the weather, and I'm not going to say don't stress about the weather, because the weather can have serious impacts, but I was so stressed about the weather and it turned out fine. So I just wanted to say that for starters. But what I did do was I did have backup plans. I had umbrellas and I had alternate locations and things like that. So just, it's a good idea to have a contingency plan, however much you may not want to think about it, and bury a sausage. Okay, the next thing I'm going to move on to is the lead up to the wedding and the things that went wrong then, because we actually had quite a few things in sort of the month leading up to the wedding, I would say, that went wrong. And the first thing was people dropping out. So obviously you've done your guest list, you've finalised it. I had printed everyone's name settings, I'd done the table plan and got that printed. You've confirmed all of your numbers with your venue, and then people start dropping out, and it can be really, really disappointing. And we actually only had one person officially drop out, and that was a family friend who lives in London who fell and broke her foot and wasn't able to make the journey up to Northumberland, which is where our wedding was, because she had like a really bad foot in her cast. So we got that call sort of, I think it was within the month leading up to the wedding. Obviously that meant that we offered her place to someone who was coming as an evening only guest, but it just meant that it was too late to kind of change the table plan and update the place setting and things. But he was perfectly fine with that. He was the only person who knew, and he was just grateful that he was there all day. And he was a bloke, he didn't care, like realistically, a place setting meant nothing to him. And we just told him, you're Michelle for the day, like look out for Michelle on the table plan. So yeah, it was disappointing. Obviously it's always disappointing when you have people drop out, but it's unavoidable. Things happen to people, and if that does happen, just try not to let it ruin your day. I was really still nervous about things like COVID, because people are still doing COVID tests even now. But yeah, so we had one drop out, but it got to the point where, like, the week of the wedding, I just didn't want my phone to ring anymore, because every time my phone rang, it seemed to be bad news. And we had another 2 potential dropouts. The first was my auntie. So I got a phone call from my uncle. I think it was on the Monday, and we were all due to go to Wood Hill on the Wednesday. And I knew as soon as it was him ringing, like he's never rang me, I don't think. So I knew it was something not good. And my auntie had fallen and cracked her rib. And yeah, she was obviously in a lot of pain. She'd been in hospital, and obviously it had just happened. So she was kind of really suffering at the time. And he was ringing to say, like, she was hoping she could make it. They weren't 100% sure. She was like, they were staying at the venue. They had a room at the venue and everything, and obviously our close family. So it would have been really disappointing if they couldn't make it. But the other part of that was that they were actually due to fly to Italy with us for our second wedding with all my family in Italy. So if you've been following my vlog, you'll know that we had a second wedding in Italy. All of my dad's family are over there, and just my sort of close family from England joined us, and Johnny's parents. And yeah, they were due to come with us, and she'd been told categorically she could not fly because she had a partially collapsed lung, so she wasn't allowed to fly. So yeah, that was like an immediate kind of week of the wedding, right? They're not coming to Italy anymore. They might not make the wedding, which was really sad news. Thankfully, they did make the England wedding. She just kind of had to take things easy, but there was plenty of seats for her to sit down and everything. So she did make it, despite obviously not feeling her best, which was a shame, but she was fully involved in the England wedding, but had to miss the Italy wedding. And then the last person was my friend called me literally the day before we were going up to Wood Hill to say that her husband had a medical procedure which was to do with his heart, and it was happening on the Wednesday, which was the day that we were all due to arrive at the wedding venue, and we were having like our rehearsal evening garden party, and they were also due to be staying up, not at our venue but up at a B&B nearby. And she basically said it depended how it went, it depended what the results were, and it depended how he was feeling, because it was quite an invasive procedure. as to whether they would make it. So at the time, the week of the wedding, I was thinking my auntie and uncle, and potentially even cousins, because I didn't know who would come like out of that family if my auntie couldn't come, plus my friend and her husband. Like, we suddenly potentially could have been down 7 places, which obviously would have been awful for multiple reasons. So I was very, very, very stressed. Thankfully all went well and they did make it as well. But I remember I'd just got into the van, we'd just loaded up the van with all the wedding stuff, and we were driving it to Johnny's parents when she called me, and this was like less than 24 hours to go, and I was just like, I don't want my phone to ring anymore, please don't ring anymore, I can't take any more bad news. The next thing which went wrong in advance of our wedding was that I got a phone call from our wedding coordinator to let us know that the bridge which led from the village to our venue had collapsed. So basically, if I can find some video footage, I'll pop it in, but you go over this little, really cute little quirky bridge that connects Otterburn, the village, to Woodhill Hall, our venue. It's literally like a 2-minute drive, and this bridge had collapsed in some storm, and it meant that the whole route to Woodhill had to be rerouted, and it only added about a 10-15 minute journey time onto getting there for like our guests and things. But it was a shame because it meant they had to go through, out, and then back sort of around, whereas it was like a really nice little trip over the bridge and you could see Woodhill in the distance. And it added extra admin. It meant that I had to get in touch with all our guests to let them know. I had to get in touch with all my suppliers to let them know, because they were all used to driving to Woodhill. And I just didn't want, like, on the wedding day, people to turn up and then have that extra 10-15 minutes. Like, that can make the difference in a lot of cases when you're on a tight schedule. It also meant, because we were having our reception in a different place to our ceremony, so we were having our ceremony at a church in a nearby village, it meant that that route was affected. So I had booked obviously a wedding car to take me and the bridesmaids. I'd also booked a shuttle bus to take our guests. So I had to get in touch with them and rearrange all of the timings to account for this extra sort of 10 minutes each way. So that was quite a lot of extra admin. It was irritating, and it was just such a freak thing to happen. But in the end, the lady who runs our venues, a bit of a ball buster, and she actually nagged the council into fixing the bridge within a couple of weeks. And yeah, it was projected to be fixed a couple of weeks after our wedding, and it was fixed before our wedding. So everything could go back to normal. I had to get back in touch with everyone to say the bridge was fixed. But I actually left the extra timings in for our transport on the day, because I just thought, now that I'd factored in that extra time, it just gave extra time, extra leeway for anything else to go wrong. So I actually left the revised timings as they were for our wedding transport. The next thing that went wrong in advance of our wedding was that my hairdresser fell through. So I'd actually booked my hairdresser like a year and a half in advance of the wedding. I booked her through my normal, like, everyday hairdresser. I had never met her, but she was recommended to me by him, and because I really like him, I felt confident booking her. She wasn't very active on like socials or anything, so I didn't see a lot of examples of her work. I phoned her, she sent me some pictures, she sounded really friendly, and her quote was reasonable, so I booked her. I then had my hair trial with her 4 weeks in advance of the wedding, and it went really not very well. Again, if you watch my vlogs at the time, you'll have seen this and you'll remember this, but my trial really didn't go well. She didn't achieve the look that I wanted, or really any look at all. And she promised me a second trial, and that didn't materialise. She actually didn't turn up for the second trial, and I just was left feeling really shaken, really not confident, not happy, and I ended up cancelling her with 3 weeks to go to the wedding. So that was really, really stressful. For someone who likes to have things all sorted, who'd booked all her suppliers a year and a half to 2 years in advance, suddenly 3 weeks out, I had no hairdresser. Luckily, my makeup trial was on the same day as my hair trial. So my makeup artist knew that the hair trial had gone wrong, and she said to me, look, I don't want to overstep, but I do know someone who does the look you want really, really well. And that was a Hollywood wave. And she said, like, I'm happy to give you her details. I don't know if she'll be available, but like, this is who I would recommend. So obviously I said, thank you so much. I looked up this person. Her socials were very active and were full of the look that I was looking for. I got in touch with her and she was so lovely, so responsive. And thankfully, because my wedding was a weekday, she actually had availability to do it. It was a Thursday and it was just all seemed to fall into place. So I booked her straight away. She couldn't fit in a trial, but as I said, I saw from her socials like loads and loads and loads of Hollywood waves. And yeah, she was just so responsive. She helped me source hair extensions and she was just really, really lovely. So I felt like really confident in advance of the day that she'd be able to do a great job of us all. And really, in the end, it felt like a blessing because she did do an amazing job. And I just feel like if I'd had the other hairdresser, the vibe wouldn't have been the same. I really didn't get on with her that well when I met her. And yeah, I just think it would have been a different vibe. And in the end, I'm thankful that everything that happened, even though it was stressful, I ended up with the perfect hairdresser for the look that I wanted. So the final thing that went wrong in advance of the wedding was the day before the wedding, we went to our church rehearsal to practice everything through. And our church had one bell, which I'd asked if we could have rung. So it wasn't going to be like do 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 do. It was just going to be one bell going doom. But I still thought it would be nice to have a bell. So they'd said yes. And the man who kind of managed the church and rung the bell came to show one of our ushers how to do it because they were going to do it on the day. And he pulled the rope and it broke. And I actually have footage of this, which I'm going to insert right now.
Oh, you're not ringing the bell then.
I got it on camera. Did you get it?
Yeah. She even got it on the video.
I got it on camera.
The last time this happened was at a wedding.
Oh, really?
I got bird's nests and all sorts on top of me. I had my best suit on. And all this debris and...
Oh, no.
Oh, well, we're not ruining you.
Yeah, the bell broke. So we were all stood there, as you can see, just kind of like, what just happened? And it meant we couldn't have the bell. Which, as I say, if it had been like the traditional wedding bells, I would have been really gutted. But it was just going to be one bell, so it wasn't a huge deal. But yeah, that was just like so random to happen. And thankfully it happened in the rehearsal and not on the day. Now I'm going to move on to the things which actually went wrong on the wedding day itself. And we actually had 4 things that went wrong during the day. So the first thing which went wrong wasn't really something which went wrong, but it's linked to the hairdresser fiasco. So because I hadn't been able to have a hair trial, I'd obviously never seen myself with Hollywood waves, and I had a lot of hair extensions put in to like thicken my hair and bulk it out because I kind of needed that volume. And so yeah, so she put all these hair extensions in, she did the Hollywood wave. The Hollywood wave was beautiful. I just felt like I had a lot of hair, like particularly here, my hair was kind of like out. It was big and I'm not used to having big hair. And I was just kind of looking at myself in the mirror thinking, I've just got so much hair. I've got like a mane, and I really felt like it was overwhelming my face, like the way it was kind of out, kind of almost a bit square like this. But it was the wedding morning. Everything was in full swing. The photographer, the videographer were there. We were doing presents and I had to get ready, and I was the last one to have my hair done, and we were running out of time. And so I was kind of like, no, it's fine, it's great. But I just kept looking at myself in the mirror and I couldn't get past this part of my head. And anyway, we did everything. We did all the photographs, we did a reveal. I met my dad, the bridesmaids went off, they left. And I was stood in Wood Hill in the room kind of closest to where the car would arrive. And it had this massive floor to ceiling mirror. And I was just staring at myself in this mirror thinking, I can't go like this. I can't go with my hair like this. I didn't feel perfect and I didn't feel beautiful. And it was just something so simple, but I just didn't have the confidence in how my face looked. And I think that's the most important thing on your wedding, that you're walking down the aisle feeling like $1 million. So I turned to the wedding coordinator. Obviously, all this had been happening in my head. And I said, Sarah, I need to pin my hair. Like, I need to pin it back. I can't go like this. And I remember she was like, right. And she panicked and I was like, do you have any bobby pins? Because our venue was amazing and they actually had all this stuff. Like, she's probably added this to the kit now. But yeah, they had loads of like stuff, but she didn't have bobby pins. And I said, I know I've got some in my room. I'd bought an entire pack of them. And I was like, I know I've got some in my room. So me in my massive ball gown, because I was wearing a ball gown, if you haven't seen, my wedding coordinator ran through the house, outside and into my bedroom, which was in the grounds. But I couldn't remember where these bobby pins were. And me being me, I'd unpacked them ready for the evening because I was having a hairpiece put in the evening. And I'd put them on my dressing table and I'd completely forgotten that I'd done this. So my wedding coordinator was rummaging through all of my bags. She was emptying everything, trying to find these clips. And she found 2 bobby pins in the bottom of a bag loose. And I took them off her and I put one here and one here, just so that my hair was basically pinned. There was so much of it that I didn't have the gap that I'm getting there now. But it just meant that it was smoothed here and it wasn't out in a square. And I just popped them in, ran back through, the car had arrived, got in the car and left for the church, and that was that. And I just felt so much better. And they just stayed, I think because I had so much fake hair and hairspray, they never budged all day. They stayed in my hair for the rest of the day. But if you'd asked me in advance of my wedding day, like, would I be rummaging for bobby pins right before I left for the church and sticking them in my hair? I would have said no, ideally not. But that was kind of one of those things that, because I hadn't had the trial, no one could have known, no one could have foreseen that, like, how I would feel with my hair done that way. So I would just say it's probably really important to have a trial if you can. It was all taken out of my hands, and in the end it did all work out, and I love my Hollywood waves, and once I put those clips in I felt $1 million. But that was something that I didn't anticipate doing right before I left for the church. The next thing that went wrong was actually the blame of our best man and it was the first sort of human error of the day. And basically the one job, and Johnny argues with me over this, but this was the one job that the best man had to remember. I know he had to give a speech, but you know, he had that written down. The one thing he had to remember was to play the music as we entered our wedding breakfast. And we'd picked a Muse song, which is like something special between Johnny and me, but also it's Johnny's favourite band, and it was a mutual favourite band of him and his best man, and they've seen them together many times. If he should have remembered anything, he should have remembered that he was supposed to be playing a Muse track. And we were stood in the same room that I was stood in before I had my hair drama, while all of our guests were entering our wedding breakfast, and then we were waiting to be announced. And I was listening for the music, and I was like, the music's not playing. And then I heard them announce our names. And I looked at Johnny and I was like, there's no music playing. I can't, like, if it's playing, it's so quiet, I can't hear it. But we had no choice but to go. And we walked in. And this is where I can't hide anything on my face. So I know, just looking at me, I just look bewildered, because I walk in and all I'm thinking is, there's no music playing. Why is there no music playing? And we kind of stop and we look around, and I'm not taking any of it in. I'm just thinking, where's the music? Where's the music? And we walked down and we walked past the best man, and I just go, where's the music? And the look on his face when he realised that he had forgotten, and his wife looked at him like, what have you done? And he came straight over to us, like, once everything had settled down. He was like, I'm so sorry, I was caught up in the moment. And I was like, Johnny's like, don't worry, don't give it another thought. And I was like really annoyed, but obviously didn't let it show. But I just thought, you had one job to remember. But again, it's not something anyone else would have known. Nobody knew we were supposed to enter to a song or to that song. And honestly, I cannot tell you a single song, or if people have entered to music, of any wedding I've been to, any wedding breakfast, I couldn't tell you. So It wasn't a big deal, like it didn't affect anything, but I am still disappointed about it. Of all the things that happened, that is the one thing that I'm a bit disappointed about, because I was just really looking forward to walking in with that music, like the music that we'd picked. It's kind of like a dramatic music, and I was just looking forward to walking into it. But in the grand scheme of things, not a huge deal. I will get over it. Maybe. There's actually a bit of a theme here, because the next thing that went wrong was our next entrance, which was our entrance into our first dance for the evening. And what happened here was we had a live band who were playing our first dance song, which was The Keeper by Blossoms. And we'd obviously been rehearsing to Blossoms. And it turns out that the song sounds very, very different played by a live band. And later on we realised our band didn't have a piano and the song's quite piano heavy. So basically what we'd done is, because our evening was in the teepees, we'd asked everyone to line up from the entrance of the teepee to the dance floor. And we were going to run through everyone to the dance floor and then start our dance. So we were stood just outside the teepee, just outside the door waiting. And we could hear kind of drums. We could hear just dun, 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 dun. And I looked at Johnny and I was like, are they just kind of playing warm-up music, waiting for us, or is this the start of the song? And the timing that it was, we kind of knew as soon as it started, we had to run to make it to the dance floor to start our dance. And we kind of choreographed a brief routine. It wasn't like a full-on routine, but we had steps to different parts. And then they started singing and we realised we'd missed the whole intro and we were still stood outside and we should be on the dance floor. So we had to kind of stop and say to our wedding coordinator, we've missed it, like we need them to start again. So she went running in and they restarted the song and then we did it properly. So again, it was just a funny moment. It really didn't matter that, you know, people, like, yes, we had a false start basically. And I've actually got a picture from this moment, which I'll pop in, that our photographer took, where I'm like, when I realised what had happened. But you know what? The one thing I kept saying before the wedding was that it's not a show. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be, I just didn't want something to go wrong in the context of like, not what we planned when you've put so much effort in, but it's not a show. And things like this like can happen and that's fine. I really, really wasn't bothered that we like missed the start and just had to do it again and then it all was fine. And that was quite funny. So the only thing I was worried about was if people had been queuing for ages waiting for us, but apparently they hadn't. So it was totally fine. And we got it right the second time. We made it to the dance floor. We did our dance and it was really good fun. And I'm really pleased we did it that way. But yeah, I had asked the band for a recording in advance and they said they couldn't do that. So it definitely would have been helpful if we'd been able to hear it and realised it sounded quite different, but it all worked out. We did our dance. It really didn't matter. The final thing that went wrong on the day was actually something which was really serious. It was such a freak thing that like nobody could have predicted. You never ever could have imagined in a million years happening. And it was just kind of like a what is happening, what is going on moment. So basically, after the ceremony, we were having our drinks reception and someone came over to us to let us know that, I can't even remember who it was, to let us know that Wendy, who was Johnny's great auntie, so his dad's auntie, was suffering from an amnesia episode and she basically didn't know where she was or what was going on. And we were just kind of like, right. So basically, yeah, she completely lost her memory, didn't know where she was, didn't know what was happening, and it was just like this weird medical incident. Obviously, we were very concerned to hear this. We actually have a family member who's a consultant, so she was sat with her. They were on the phone to 111, and ultimately someone ended up driving her to hospital. Now, I'm going to say she is absolutely fine, and it was a freak thing that can happen apparently. It has a name, I've forgotten what it's called, but it's something amnesia. But basically, where you just forget where you are and what's going on. And she's totally fine now. But yeah, for that to happen during our wedding was just crazy. Like, how could you ever imagine or predict that something like that is going to happen? So it was really, really sad that she had to leave. She doesn't remember our ceremony. She obviously didn't see the rest of the wedding, and also the person who left and took her to hospital missed the rest of the wedding. Ultimately, the most important thing is that she is okay. that could have turned into something much bigger, like an ambulance turning up. So I'm really, really grateful that the person who took her to hospital did that for us. And they said they didn't want like an ambulance turning up and things. And it was actually the wife of one of Johnny's cousins who did that. But yeah, again, despite that being quite a serious thing, none of the other guests were any the wiser. The only people who knew were immediate family who needed to be told in that moment. And nobody else knew. Nobody was aware that it was going on. It was a quiet incident. She was just kind of sat there with family and then left. But yeah, when I talk about people not being in control of themselves, that is what I mean. Like, nobody could have done anything to prevent that. So, as you can see, a few things did go wrong with our wedding, but ultimately it was still the perfect day. Most of the time, nobody was any the wiser to any of these things happening, and it didn't impact or change anything for us, really. There was a couple of other things as well that I found out after the fact. So a couple of my own errors I'd made, and that's where like even I got things wrong and I was meticulous. But it turned out that I'd done this picture frame, like family tree, and on it I'd put our parents and our grandparents' wedding pictures and their wedding dates. Turns out I got my grandparents' wedding date wrong, my grandma told me. And another thing I noticed was that I missed a dish off our menu. We'd printed menus, and for some reason I completely forgot that there was 2 meat dishes, and I just listed 1 meat, 1 vegetarian, 1 meat, 1 vegetarian. Totally missed off a chicken dish from the menu. I don't think anyone will have noticed that, but I was like getting rid of the last ones, you know, the leftovers. I looked at it and I was like, I've completely missed off a dish from that menu. So like, we all make mistakes, and you know, little things like that are probably going to happen too. Like I said, it's not just my wedding. The wedding I went to after my wedding, there was a power cut in the middle of the evening. So apparently the fire alarm went off, it cut the power, and there was about a half an hour gap where the DJ couldn't play. There was power because there was lights. It must have been certain power. But you know what? It didn't change anything. We were sat talking before it happened. We sat talking during it happening and after. And I didn't even see the bride the whole time this happened. I don't know if she even knew it happened, because it was a big venue, there was different rooms, and this only affected obviously the room the DJ was in. But is that like a big deal? Is that something that I would be telling people, oh yeah, I went to this wedding, it was great, but there was a power cut? No, I wouldn't be. Like, it was such a tiny blip. Yaz was telling me that a wedding she went to, someone had an allergic reaction to the wedding cake. So that was quite a serious thing where an ambulance did turn up. And yeah, there's kind of always going to be something. Hopefully not something like that, because that's really awful. You don't want anyone to be having medical episodes. But ultimately, something, hopefully smaller than that, but something is probably going to happen. Weddings are big, big occasions with lots of moving parts. And basically, when you have a big wedding, there is a lot of potential for something to go wrong, unfortunately. At one point, we went up to our venue for a meeting, and they often did the meetings in the day, like in the switchover period from a wedding leaving and a wedding arriving. And our meeting was like of the hour before a couple was due to arrive for their wedding. And we were sat chatting with our wedding coordinator, looked out the window, and there was a tractor on fire in the field next to the venue. And it was this massive tractor on fire. 2 fire engines came, and I just remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, like if you were about to arrive for your wedding, there was just smoke everywhere, there was fire engines. What can you do? Like, you can't predict that. We had a pizza van garden party the night before our wedding, so if that happened before we turned up, it would have been a nightmare. But what can you do? Like, these things happen, and you just kind of have to have a sense of humour about it. So that is everything that went wrong with our wedding. I really hope you've enjoyed listening to this, and if you are planning a wedding, I hope it hasn't scared you. I hope it's reassured you that even if things do go wrong, it'll be fine. You'll still have an amazing time, and you know, these things happen, and you just get on with it and move on, and most people probably won't even be any the wiser. Thanks so much for watching this video. It's not the end of the wedding series. I've still got quite a few of the post-wedding vlogs to come. I've got ones that I filmed before the wedding that I've still got to edit. things like everything that I bought for the wedding that I didn't want to show beforehand that I can show now. And yes, I'm definitely going to do some more wedding content if you've been enjoying the wedding series. Do let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.